Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force Steering Committee for January 21st, 2021. But before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Welcome, everyone. Turn off my cheating light. Both eyes don't work as well as they used to. Our first item up is implementing the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, the GARE toolkit. Stephen, I remember you had asked me at our last steering committee, I think, if the council had done any action involving if GARE was mentioned. Jill looked that up this morning, and we found a resolution that was done by the health board. It was the racial racism is a threat to public health. And in that resolution, she forwarded it to you. There's some language in referencing GARE as a potential program that the county could take up. So it has been mentioned to the council, and it's documented in a resolution.
Yes, I was wondering, Barry, I thought I had read something that you were considering or had adopted the toolkit and were considering becoming a member of GARE.
Yeah, the statement concerning that is building and strengthening alliances with other organizations that are confronting racism and encouraging other agencies to recognize racism as a crisis, including considering county membership in the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, GARE, which is a national network, blah, blah, blah. So we did mention that it would be something that the county should consider looking at. So we would need to take another step should we want to become members.
Is there any active consideration of that at this point?
Not. I thought maybe we could kick that around as just a quick topic here, part of this agenda item on how we might do that. It might be good to come from the task force as that recommendation to the council. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Mike Parker has his hand raised.
Mike, go ahead.
Hi, morning. Thank you. Yeah, as you know, I kind of did some research into GARE and really advocated for that. Its framework, I think, is uniquely suited to government work and the work of policy groups such as ours. And, you know, as we've started our steps in infancy in the task force in implementing it, one of the things that has really come forward to me is how useful membership could be. From the cohort support and various types, I think it would really help us implement and do it faster. Not that we couldn't do it in a homegrown way, but I think the cost is reasonable and the support would be really great and could help us kind of get it kickstarted. So it's just my two thoughts in kind of evaluating and looking at different tools. I really think that this would be outstanding for us, and would like to recommend that the task force, from its research and review of this, views adopting or being a part of GARE would be really beneficial.
Okay.
Mike, could you say a little bit more about what sort of support we'd get as a GARE member and what the membership cost would be, so we might have a more fleshed out recommendation to the council?
You know, I don't have that off the top of my head. I believe that is publicly available on the website, though, and I'll see if I can dig something up here in just a few.
Any others have comments on how to start a process? Okay, we'll take a look at what you send, Mike, and get it onto the agenda for February 1st. Does that sound good for everybody? Okay.
Barry, are you thinking of a formal resolution or recommendation for February 1st?
do we make recommendations that go outside the scope of that, right? Do we do? Haven't we made recommendations just through motions?
Yeah,
I mean, we could do a resolution if we think we have the resources and time.
well, I mean, if we have enough information to formalize that, I'd be willing to try to draft something, but I'd need to depend on what information Mike can dig up or convey.
Okay, so what you could probably take what Mike sent and maybe some of the framework that's in our resolution that we just sent you, and some of that is maybe overlapping language, and you know, that'll give you a place to start because there'll be some references in the whereases anyway. So, Ann?
I was just going to say that there are a couple different efforts underway, including the resolution by the health board. So I guess I just want to make sure that everything's aligned with everything else so that we don't have too many fingers in this.
So that's what I was referring to as the resolution by the health board.
Yeah.
To Ann's point, and I don't believe we have Heather on today, Heather Flaherty, but there is some work afoot, I believe, to make a racial equity commission. And I don't think those are mutually exclusive. However, coordination is really beneficial, and making sure that all things are aligned.
Yeah, I'm on that work group for the Racial Equity Commission, so I'm pretty aware of what's going on there.
Barry, what's your thought based on what you see about those things running side by side or concurrently together?
Well, there's a lot of things going on that are going to be folded up under that thing. I've had some calls from some folks out on Lummi Island wanting to talk about the ICE ordinance that they were proposing a year ago with having law enforcement have a distance from ICE. We didn't take it up a year ago, but that kind of falls under that same umbrella. And I am communicating with some of the leaders of the Racial Equity Commission activity, and making sure that we're not leapfrogging and or stacking too many things up in front of that plate, because that's kind of the kickoff to this whole effort. I'm thinking, and that should hopefully happen sometime midsummer this year. We're hoping. So timing will be everything on that. As far as this, let me bounce that off of one of those leaders today, and I'll get back to you and let you know what they think.
I think that would be helpful. I guess I was thinking of this both as, I guess, as resources and guidance and technical assistance that might be available to us on a policy level across county government, our task force and other bodies, that I thought was a little bit separate from what the focus of the Racial Equity Commission might be. But if you think that's sort of step one, then probably we ought to hold off a little bit on this.
Raylene?
I'm unmuting. Okay, so this is kind of outside the box, but I think it still applies to the GARE thing. I just had Jill send a packet to everybody, and the title is a Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Fund by and for organizations. And not to go into it too deep because I haven't actually gotten through it. We just got it from the Administration Office of the Courts. But the purpose of the application is to develop and enhance culturally and community specific services for individuals and community. Services and activities must be provided by organizations that are operated by and for the community to be served. Marginalized communities may include ethnic and racial minorities, immigrants, refugees, individuals with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, individuals who are disabilities, or who are deaf and Native Americans. Obviously, there's a lot more to this. They are looking at awarding 10 $250,000 grants. I originally, when I first got this, thought it was just for the courts, but it's not. It can be used for mental health There's all kinds of different expenses that can be used for childcare, for community education, for community policing initiatives, assistance with impact statements, restitution advocacy. So there's all kinds of different expenses in which it can be used for. The real kicker is that I just got this. I haven't had time to go through all of it. It's not something I've done in the past. But I think it could be beneficial to what we're trying to promote. And I would like support and assistance if this is something others think would be worthwhile in pursuing for Whatcom County. My initial thought was we assisted another court that ended up having to close down last week due to COVID. And there was a lot of Spanish speaking individuals, and trying to contact them and get them court dates changed and not being able to understand them was an extreme difficulty. And they're obviously we're going to have to help reschedule it and continue working with that court. So I was just thinking on the court perspective initially, but this is way broader than what I initially thought. And so I wanted to bring it to the committee for you guys to review.
What's the deadline for submission if you were to apply?
February 12th. Yeah, I know.
Arlene?
Who is this coming from?
It's the Office of Crime Victims Advocacy, but it was provided to us by the Administration Office of the Courts.
Is this
So it's
federal or state?
I believe it's state, but like I said, I haven't read through everything on it.
Well, Anne, you've got a lot of knowledge about grants.
I do, and I'm up to my gills in those right now.
But
I
It
typically
sounds-
write these, you know, like at midnight every night, and I don't know that I
I'm
have it
sorry.
in me to do that right now. But if it is Office of Crime Victims Advocacy, I'm assuming that's the state. And how many grants were they offering?
$250,000.
That's good money.
I think the question would be, what would we use it for? That would have to be determined pretty quickly.
Right.
And then that would help decide who may have time to write it up. And I don't know how lengthy the application is either.
I did send off a copy of everything, I think, but I'll double check to make sure there's not more. Application is looking like it's about 10 to 15 pages here.
Raylene, one thing that comes to my mind listening to that is the financial bind that the pretrial processes work group has run into. Would you mind if I routed that to retired Judge Garrett and Judge Freeman just to take a look at and see if it has any relevance there? I agree with Ann that we'd have to target it very quickly because then there'd be the grant writing process, but.
Right, and I'm open to anybody in our group to be able to distribute it to see if it's something that would be beneficial. It did look like it was focused on racial and ethnic backgrounds or people with disabilities and biracial. So that's why I kind of wanted to bring it into this conversation. But by all means, I'm more than happy to help write it. Like I said, I've only done one grant in my life, but I've been awarded what I've put in. So I'm willing to help. And
You're hired.
It sounded very broad. What you described, the subject areas were very broad. And also, I would think that the racial and ethnic organizations that are very active right now would want to know about this for their purposes too. But we're always out of money. So, I mean, it seems to me, you know, I can't say what the topic should be, but I know we need it.
Mike Parker.
Yeah, hi, just wanted to check in. Raylene, is this I want to make sure it's the same one that Jill sent out earlier for us to look at? The Office of Crime Victims Advocacy, Coronavirus, Aid Relief and Economic Security Act, supplement funding. It's that one, right?
Exactly.
Okay. The way I'm reading this, and I might be getting this wrong, is when I saw buy-in for, I believe this is targeted commerce funds for buy-in for organizations that are primarily composed of and or serve marginalized communities. I'm not saying we're ineligible. I'm just, as I read that, I wonder if we're the target for that. And I'm looking really on the, let's see, screens 9 to 10, I guess. Near the beginning of that document. And I'm looking at the introduction and then the background. It says funding has been set aside specifically for programs operated by and for marginalized population. Commerce's allocation plan includes funding for up to 9 projects made in response to this by and for request proposal.
So it's open to nonprofits. Are governments even, I wonder if they're prohibited.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to see. So I'll see if I can look at that real quick. And then Stephen, it'll make sense whether it makes sense for you to take it to Judge Garrett and Judge Freeman.
I have to say, just with a lawyer's ear, the fact that it says by and for rather than by or for doesn't sound promising.
Any public agency, tribe, or nonprofit with the primary mission and history of serving specific marginalized community is encouraged to apply for this funding to provide culturally and community-specific services.
I won't forward it on until we have a little clearer sense of the relevance for us.
No, that's fine. I'm looking here at the email that I got with it. There was actually one other portion of the paperwork, and it said, is there alerted AOC to the availability of additional funding available for courts to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the impacts of COVID, including revenue loss and case backlog? The provisions of this grant funding allow for a very wide range of applications, provided they are focused on prevention, preparing, and or responding to COVID. Eligible proposals may include addressing backlog of cases caused by the pandemic, replacement of budgeted funds reduced or eliminated by the pandemic, and other activities addressed to COVID mitigation and response. And that's where I kind of thought it was focused on the courts when we first got it, just because it came from AOC and it had to do with COVID, but it does seem very broad. So if everybody can take a look at it and then see if it's something we can use, I think it'd be beneficial if we could.
That sounds good. And Dan, what do you think about the sequencing of the GARE thing with the Racial Equity Commission coming up, and as far how do we sequence that makes the most sense?
So I just texted Sue Ling. I've got a pardon me, block my throat. I've got a call with her this afternoon to ask her that very question, because to me, I don't want to have the work. I don't want any work to be at cross purposes with each other. So I do think that sequencing, and there's an order of operations. I wanted to get her perspective as they build out the commission, just how policy work recommendations would be implemented. So I'll be able to come back to this group and provide that perspective after my conversation with her.
Okay.
And could you also see if she could make any ballpark estimate of the time frame that she's working with for the commission?
Well,
Yeah,
I think that's mid-July or somewhere in that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's towards the second quarter, middle of the year is what we're shooting for. The meetings have been basically, I think, almost weekly with the executive and the mayor's office. And then we meet separately to kind of work towards process oriented items. So, but yeah, I think there is a value in understanding this new commission, what their role will be, and then how we internally do our GARE items. And then if we're making recommendations on GARE to the council and such, then how does it all work? So
Exactly. That was my thoughts too, Dan. So thank
Yeah.
you for doing that.
okay, I'll report back to the group either via email or at our next steering meeting.
Okay. Anything else on GARE implementation?
I'll just say thanks to you, Barry, for sort of getting this right and getting it coordinated in a good way.
Oh, sure. Anything else? Okay, let's move on for items for our February 1st task force agenda.
I wanted to make sure that we sent the link to the Bellingham Herald article on the opening of the Crisis Stabilization Center. And they did do a video on their website that would be great to share and maybe even show during the meeting. The county exec's office is also finalizing their production of a video of the facility, and the architect has also hired a photographer that is going to be out there this weekend to take pictures, both drone shots from above and some pictures inside. So I just think, given it was such a huge priority for the task force, that we should maybe have a show and tell opportunity to let everyone see what we've accomplished.
Yeah.
In Ann's committee meeting this morning, we thought maybe 10 or 15 minutes for video. Ann has some updates and probably will have some more by February 1st. So just keeping the whole task force up to speed on where things stand with that would be a good agenda item.
Yeah. Other pressing issues that we need to get on our plate.
I just want to confirm with Ann the agenda item on the update on the behavioral health crisis response expansion.
Yes, we should probably give at least a brief update on where we are. Did we ever share the Gantt chart with this, the incarceration task force, in terms of the activities we're involved in and the timeline for how we're moving forward in the planning and design process?
I believe I forwarded that, but I can include it in the packet for this meeting as well, if you like.
Yes, and Ashley from our office has the most updated one. We added some information to it, so hopefully makes a little bit more sense and gives them more context to people.
Okay.
Do we need to
Caleb,
have
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Barry.
Oh, Caleb had his hand up.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted to point out that I realize Index Committee will have an opportunity to speak about the last meeting that we've had, but since the last meeting, I personally have been trying to find ways to gather information on a larger, or in terms of a higher scale, for community leaders, for activists, for people who are about, social justice and criminal justice reform, to make informed decisions moving forward. And there is a product out there that might present some hope for us. There's a not-for-profit company called Recidiviz, and I can't remember how to spell it. I can't spell anything out loud, but their mission and goal is to gather information for organizations across a criminal justice organization, gather data points, and then make them available in such a way that they can be useful in helping determine not only a direction forward, but how effective a change can be. So again, if we're looking for meaningful change, and I think we are in our community, we really need to talk about a way that we can get useful information in the hands of the people who are making the decisions. So I just wanted to, I don't know if that's part of the committee report out, and I would offer it up to the group as far as what the thoughts are here.
Thoughts on that, Ann?
Caleb, is that a product that's primarily used by jails? Or is it a more of a community-based product?
It is used by prisons, jails, so it's relatively new. So, and I don't know a ton about it. So, but from the information I was able to gather, that it can be used by jails, prisons, law enforcement, all kinds of information sources can be gathered together into one location so that that information can be put to good use. So things from the prosecutor, public defender, the courts, the jails, the community corrections, the mental health, court aspect. There's so many things that we have even in our own community, and sort of the cry for help is clear that we don't know what we don't know. There are so many things involved in the criminal justice system that the data points aren't, they're not easy to get a hold of. They're not easy to grasp. And my fear moving forward is if, we want meaningful change, that we don't make change with an understanding of what the potential consequences would be, and that we go in a direction that is unhealthy for our community. And again, I could speak about this for a long time, but this is the reason why it's burdening me, is because I feel like we need to have a bigger picture understanding of what our data points are in the whole community on this topic.
Caleb, if your question was, is that within or beyond the scope of the index committee? I would say it's absolutely within the scope. That kind of integration of data and transparency to the whole community, I think is really exactly what we want from the index committee. So if it needs some further feasibility exploration, I would encourage you to go ahead and do it.
What I mean by my question is, I can certainly speak about it during my time when it's time to report out for the index committee, but is this something that should be a separate line item for the agenda, or should it just be something that I report out on as part of the normal course? Does that make sense?
What would you prefer, Stephen?
I think I heard you say this sort of came onto the radar screen after your last committee meeting.
We talked about it initially at the meeting, where we've got a hope for partnering with some consultants to help us get, a direction of travel and some potential for, what this could look like. But again, the discovery that I had happened after the meeting.
I don't think there's a wrong answer to your question. It sounds as if it could be part of your of a full report from the committee. You touched on it in the committee and you've done some further research on it, and here's where things stand.
I appreciate it. Again, this is just new kid on the block. I don't know the ropes all that well yet, so I'm just trying to figure out what the
Mr. New Kid, we've been talking in steering about the importance of coordinating information and getting information not just out to the leaders and activists, but also to the general public, who needs to know, in my opinion, what needs to be done still and what we have already accomplished. Because many things have already been accomplished through this organization and with the urging of this organization and its members. And it's really important, and the public does not know what we have done. They don't know, but especially you talked about the activists and leaders, they should know everything. I mean, I did not know until we had the report in behavioral health committee the other day about the numbers of counselors in the schools. I was like, how could I have not known that? So now I know it, but I think the accomplishments there should be in the public eye, absolutely. And also that helps those programs gain support, and it encourages the public to be hopeful about, you know, the things that can be accomplished. So yes, do it.
So, anything else on the agenda? Dan, you had your hand up.
Oh, this is for Caleb. I would say just like generally speaking, what's worked pretty well in the past is to work stuff out as much as you can within the committee that you're on, and then bring that information forward back to the either steering or to the task force would be the appropriate one, in my opinion. That way you're, you know, in theory, your experts reside within your committee, and the work can be done there with the report out later. The one thing I would, as someone who's got a little bit of interest in this data component, I would want to understand how big your universe of people is. So is it just jail? What is it? Do you track post-release? And how far upstream can you go in terms of point of contact at arrest, and what information is being collected there? And then can the systems talk to one another if they need to? I don't know if they do. Can Spillman talk to, I don't know, would talk to our CAD system or to Gelada? I don't even know if it needs to talk to those, but like, what's the relationship between those systems, and what works and what doesn't? And to me, I look at it as kind of like what Arlene just said. It's like accomplishments, but I would deem it as kind of like lay of the land, just so people can understand. It's an education component for everybody. So, and then thanks for doing the work. Really super important work.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. Raylene?
I think the one thing that I've heard over and over again is that, you know, when somebody goes into the jail or they go into prison, that data is easier to track. The data that's not being tracked is when it's a cite and release and criminal charges and they're going to court and they're not being incarcerated. And so I'd be interested on that end, on how much data is available, especially even with the prosecutors, how many cases they're getting and they're not actually pursuing, they're not turning it down. Because I think we see that too, is that law enforcement are sending stuff off, and is it triage because they're like, okay, these cases are a priority and these cases aren't. And so I think that's something that we should also be aware of, and the ethnicity and the race on those. Is there a difference on who we're prosecuting and who we're not?
Yeah, and just for your all's edification, the easy answer to all of this is we don't communicate. Spillman has interfaces with CAD. Spillman has interfaces with a couple of other systems. But Raylene's right. If somebody comes into jail, I can get a hold of the information. I don't have good numbers on anybody who is, say, and I'm going to just throw some specifics out there, but this is just made up. Somebody who's arrested by a member of Ferndale Police Department and cited on the spot, referred to Ferndale Court, and they're adjudicated in Ferndale Court, and they never see the corrections system. We never know about those cases, and how many of those exist. How many of them are cited in the field for any agency and then go into warrant status for perpetuity? How many cases, are on the periphery of, the traditional jail system? Those numbers, I think, are important to track, because number one, it shows if things are fully coming around the jail and going, from point A to point B, and they're fully adjudicated outside of the jail system, I think that's a win. I think, though, if we've got a huge backlog of warrants, which we know we have a number of warrants pending, that's a different issue. And how do we track that information? Again, we've got different courts that capture their own information. They don't necessarily, in many ways, talk to one another. We still have a number of agencies that don't have more than paper records at this point. So that is the challenge. And I absolutely believe that this is Index's calling, is to try and get to the bottom of this issue. And I don't mean to hijack all the time, but I could soapbox about this for a long time about trying to get all of this information integrated. So I think I'll shut up. But
Well, I tell you what, we certainly have the right person chairing Index. Thank you, Caleb. Yeah, Stephen.
I just wanted to say, I endorse Dan's view of the preferable process here. So I guess for the February 1st meeting, Caleb, my reaction would be, you've talked about the need to bump this up a level of integrating and getting a whole system picture. And I think that's an exciting point in your conversation. So I would definitely include that in the report. And then maybe go ahead within the committee and on your own and investigate this particular kind of software and report back at the appropriate time. With the other threads of the conversation, I would add that, to me, one of the biggest reasons we focused on data is for accountability purposes to the community, so that they can track whether we're making any progress, whether we're making it fast enough, whether we're making it in the right places. So it needs to be comprehensive. Kudos to you. It needs to be accessible to the community. This looks like a promising thing. That's the way I look at the value of the data.
perfect. I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on agenda items for February 1st?
Hey, do we need to keep an eye on anything that's happening in Olympia? I'm thinking, behavioral health is looking at that 988 bill, which is I think it's a suicide prevention. It is a suicide prevention bill, but I'm just wondering if there's anything else that we should be looking for, like coming out of Roger Goodman, Representative Goodman's out of the 45th. He's the chair, was the chair. I assume he still is, of the Public Health, Safety, and Justice. Anything? I don't know if Ann has a read on that, or anyone else on this call on pending legislation.
So our Association of County Human Services is certainly following all the bills. Are we meeting every other month for the task force? Is that our typical schedule, or once a month?
Every month.
It's possible that we would know more. There are just hundreds of bills that were dropped, less this year simply because they're working remotely. But I guess I would not want us to spend too much time on a bill that doesn't go very far. That's what I would say. There are definitely a lot of bills about just police practices that are being introduced in terms of prohibiting, chokeholds and things like that. And in behavioral health, there's talk about involuntary treatment, but I don't know that there's anything that stood out to me to glom onto early on.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we were good in that regard. This is the long session this year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that would, Ann, would you say that would be more like maybe like a March item?
Yes, because I think then you're getting close to, which bills are going to have legs. And if we really want to weigh in, then that would be a good time to do so. I think the only other thing I would say is, with respect to the operational funding for the Crisis Stabilization Center, it looks like right now we may be okay. But I have talked with both Representatives Shoemake as well as Rule about maybe passing a bill that would identify the Whatcom Stabilization Center as a pilot project for the state that allows for criminal justice diversion, police officers to do so on the spot. We really only have one other program in the state that does that, in the southeast corner, and it's a very small program. And part of that was just to try to set the stage for not only highlighting the service, but making sure that the state understands the importance of funding it. Because I don't know that all the managed care organizations have the same value.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
I don't have the final numbers in yet. So I did write up a legislative request about that, but I had no dollar amount to put in the dollar request.
We,
I'm waiting on negotiations to finish with one of the providers.
I think we absolutely need to advocate for us being a pilot, for like a shining example of how to do this. And I mean, like you said, there's only one other that's doing it, and they're tiny. So I don't know if you would need anything from this group to help advocate to our reps, if that would be helpful. But I'd be happy to sign on to anything that would advocate for that. I think it's a good thing.
All right,
Jack
I'll
and I
try
would
to-
also.
thanks. I'll try to push the provider that's still in negotiations to get me their estimate so we know. Because it's really the mental health provider that is the one that would be able to use the law that allows for law enforcement diversion. And they're the ones still in negotiations.
Raylene,
So am I hearing that it would be better to have Jill pencil into the March meeting agenda, a legislative report where, and I think we've touched on the two areas that we want to target: behavioral health legislative changes and law enforcement focused changes.
Raylene,
On Dan's question on legislative things, I know that there is a new Senate Bill 520 or 5226 concerning the suspension of driver's license for traffic infractions. It's gone to the House several times and the Senate on different occasions, different versions. This is a new one. It looks like they're adding in that they, instead of having 15 days to respond to a traffic infraction, it'd be 30 days. And that they're putting in language that would allow the person to state that they don't have the ability to pay the infraction in full. And there could be some different options to assist an individual rather than automatically suspending for certain traffic infractions. It has been changed throughout the years. It used to be all infractions that were traffic. Now it's only moving infractions that could cause a suspension. So as things change, some of the bills haven't passed, but due to this one being more specific towards a person's inability to pay the traffic infraction, it'd be interesting to see how this one plays out for suspensions.
anything else for our next full task force meeting agenda?
Can I just summarize what I've heard so far? The update from Ann on the Crisis Stabilization Center, including the Bellingham Herald link. The update also from Ann on behavioral health crisis response expansion. And I missed the first part of the conversation with Mike earlier. Were you talking about a recommendation to the county that the county join GARE? Was that the direction you guys were going?
I think we're going to hold off on that at this point. Dan is going to be talking to some of the folks at the Racial Equity Commission work group, and we'll follow up on that.
Okay, so don't include that on the agenda.
Correct.
And then committee reports, and that's really all I have.
Okay. Raylene. Okay, Raylene was just thumbs up. Okay, gotcha. Okay, any other business for us? Okay, we go to public comment. Do we have anyone on, Jill, that from the public that would like to speak?
No, there are no attendees today.
No attendees today. Okay, folks, thanks for being here, and we'll see you on February 1st at our task force meeting. Dan, let me know what you find out from Sue, if you can. Just
Yeah,
text me.
we'll do.
Barry, can I get you to stay behind for a sec?